Alright guys, as you can see, I have put the receiver battery in there. I used some shoe glue and kind of trim away some of the plastic on the receiver battery. Use a Ultimate Racing 2500 LiPo. Then you can see my cut that I have there. That's how I run my wires through. Have my receiver in. I put foam on the bottom of the receiver box, front to back, and kind of just weave the wires around in there. You want your receiver to be able to move around. You don't you want to servo tape your receiver down in a 1/8 scale car. They just take a lot of abuse. I don't run a switch, so I have an extension coming from the receiver that I will plug in to my battery. And that's actually a really cool Assault RC extension that has a cool clip. When you plug it in, it kind of snaps together so it won't come unplugged. You can get those at Beach RC. That's Assault RC extension wire. And yeah, next we'll go ahead and start working on the linkage. Yo, what's up guys? Back working on the world's car here, and just kind of last few steps, kind of tedious steps here, but finishing steps. Have the clutch, the linkage, motor install, stuff like that. As you can tell, I've opened up some of the last few bags. I'm gonna just run through some of those steps. We can start with the tank. I installed the fuel line guides there. Just go through, kind of put in the little bushings. What I do is kind of squeeze them where you can just get like one corner through there. And then I use a 1.5, gently push the edges through the hole. Start on the bottom, putting the little side in first, because when it's all through, you have the thin side and then the thick side. Pretty easy. But if you don't really know the right way, you can kind of tear these, get them messed up. What you don't really want to use, what you really don't want to do. Those are important. Keep your tank from cracking, stuff like that. Later, I'll show you guys how I do my pole here. I wouldn't recommend using the Tekno pole. I just use like a zip tie, and I feel like that works best when you go upside down. It doesn't get you know, stuck or kind of cause anything where the tank lid will open up. If you use this pole, sometimes it will go back, hit the body, and kind of just use it as a lever and just open the tank up. So you'll definitely have some issues there. So boom, got that tank. Since I'm going to the Worlds, they will be measuring tanks. Just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and put the medium, I don't know what you call it, I don't know, tank capacitor thing, I don't know, the medium tank thingy in there. I use a tie screw just to kind of make sure it's all good and clean, nothing getting in the fuel. So boom, tank's pretty much ready to go. With the new updated tanks, if you had an original 2.0, there were some issues with the tanks. 2.1, same kind of last version tank we had with the 2.0. That clunk can't move around. No issues there at all. Tank is good to go. Gonna now move on to building the clutch. After opening these packages, I'm super excited to see that they have changed how they do the countersinking in these clutch shoes. So there's going to be no more binding, which is awesome. If you've ran Tekno before, you hopefully know that there was some binding that would happen with the clutch shoes, and you had to kind of clean them out. Sorry, I was looking for the rest of my pieces here. So yeah, you had to kind of ream them. Some people drill them, some people use a reamer. There's kind of a couple different ways you could go about doing that and just making sure that your clutch is working properly. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what to do. The best thing to do is just put the shoe on, no spring. Put the screw through, tighten it down, make sure that that thing can just fall down super free, which I'm very happy to say there was no reaming needed for these. But if you are buying Tekno clutch shoes, not sure exactly when this running change happened, I have not received any new clutch shoes that have that change. So if you're buying clutch shoes, I'm going to show you what the original one kind of looked like, and it just had one countersink in there. These new ones, that countersink's kind of driven down further in. Basically what would happen, the threads would catch and your shoe would be completely bound up. Like, I am moving the shoe with my wrench, which is not good, because if you tighten that down, the shoe doesn't move freely at all. So your clutch would not work if you didn't modify them. Super stoked to see that that change was made. So if you buy some clutch shoes and they're not in that running change, I use a reamer. You go in just on the side that has that countersink, because basically you need to just drive that countersink down further so that the threads don't get stuck. Not sure if you'll be able to see it, but I ran that countersink down further. And then after you do that, you want to give them all a little check just to make sure. You can pretty much tell, because if it's hitting that very last part you twist, you're going to feel. And just like that, super free, like how they need to be. So definitely do that reamer trick if you have some Tekno shoes already, or if you buy some new ones and they're not in that running change. Definitely want to make sure that your clutch shoes are nice and free. I'm going to go ahead, build this clutch up. 2.1 kit comes with 2 gold, 2 green. Green are 0.9, gold is 1.0. Which that's pretty much, sorry I didn't really show you that. I kind of had to put some pressure on my leg and kind of tweak it a little to get that to go in. This is actually the setup that I run, I would say 90% of the time. Oh, got it. 90% of the time on my buggy. I run it probably 90% of the time on my truck too. If I go somewhere where I need a little bit more power, maybe it's a higher elevation, something like that, where I need my engine to rev up a little bit more, I might change my shoe setup or my spring setup just a little bit. One thing unique that I do, let me see if it says in the kit. Yeah, it kind of shows do like green, gold, which that's kind of the more normal way. I actually run the same springs next to each other, so I do like green, green, gold, gold. When you're pushing these through, just use your wrench a little bit just to guide that pin all the way through. You might have to wiggle it a little bit. Thread it in. I don't use any Loctite or nothing. You don't want to crazy tighten those either, just because it's only a 1.5 head. Oh man, dropped another one. Need to get a little closer to my table, I guess. Alright, so I did the 2 golds first. Now I'm doing the 2 greens. No magic tricks here. I really like this clutch setup though. I feel like when you run them side by side, I feel like I just get a little bit better bite with the clutch. No slipping. This seems like it just works a little bit better for me. Not going to be life-changing if you go green, gold, green, or green, green, gold, gold. This one giving me a little fit. So if I'm having a hard time with it, I'll just push my fingernail to kind of get the inside part to go down and try to line the pin up. It's not wanting to. Ah, there we go. Boom. Clutch ready to go. So just wanted to get that built, get that out of the way, and I think we're just gonna jump on into the linkage. Pretty important part of the car build. So I think we'll go ahead and just jump into that right now. You know, you have a steering linkage, which you have your steering link. I use a Lunsford turnbuckle. It's already got that part built. I use the Tekno aluminum 25 horn as the 2 mounting positions. I'm going to go ahead and use the outside mounting location. I'm going to use just a little bit of blue Loctite here. Thread that through. Tighten that down real nice and tight. Now I'm gonna put the link on, put a little bit of blue Loctite. I'm gonna use a flange nut here. Let's see what it calls for. It calls for just a standard nut. I'm going to use a flange. Oh, that's pretty cool. I was wondering what in the world this was for. It's like might just be like the shock, like a shock pin. I was like, man, what the heck is that for? They actually changed it a little bit. Instead of using the nut on the bottom, it uses that screw, pops up any nut on the top. Kind of a cool idea, cool design. We'll wait a little bit to put that on. So, did that. Now we're going to move on to throttle linkage. Sorry, I'm clearing my throat so much. Alright, I'm going to pop the bearings in like so. I have a couple little tricks that I do. I'm going to get my drill ready. Move on to the other side. I'm using the 25 tooth, so I have the throttle horn with the F on it for freaking awesome. Maybe, I don't know. Might not stand for that, but I think it does. Alright. Put the 2 pieces in on the brake side that are needed. You don't want to over tighten this. It needs to be just right so that you don't have a ton of slop, but the horn can move freely. So that's pretty sweet right there. And then, like I said, I'm gonna have a couple little tricks. First trick, I'm gonna take the threaded brake linkage. So you're gonna have 3 rods that are partially threaded, partially not. 2 longer ones, 1 short one, 2 long ones are for the brake linkage. I'm gonna chuck that into my drill. And then I'm gonna run this thing through. Make sure I'm lined up good and straight. And I'm just gonna run this thing back and forth a few times. Get a little farther away from the mic for you guys. Oh, you can see it smoking. Basically, just loosening that up. First side I did is the top side, so I'm actually going to make that side flush with the back. You'll see why a little bit later. Bottom side. Make sure we're good and straight. And run this bad boy through a few times. You want to do this so that when you're adjusting your brake linkage, just not quite as hard. Alright, and for the bottom one, I have a little bit of thread going through. You'll see why. I went ahead, put all my set screws and all the linkage kind of stoppers and grommets and whatever, all those items. Use blue Loctite on those. So for the lower one, I'm going to go ahead, put it flush with the rod, and actually gonna back that one out just a little bit, get some of that plastic off that came out while it was getting threaded. Back that out just a little bit. Alright, so the bottom one I have on the outside of the horn. Top one I put on the inside of the horn. I like to do that just to kind of clean up my linkage a little bit, and so I can really kind of tell front brake to rear brake, and you're not, you know, you have room to kind of adjust both of them. All right. Once you kind of have that, you can make sure that your horn still moves. You can tell it's a little bit tighter. Now that I put those rods through, just going to crack that loose a little. Now we're kind of changing. You'll want to check that as you run your car just a little bit. But that side's looking good. Now we'll move over to the other side. Throttle linkage side. You have this little guy goes down in. You have the nut part that goes through the bearings. Just do that with my finger. I'm going to go ahead, put a 2.5 through. Use my 7mm. Tighten that bad boy down. Which I think I screwed up earlier in the video and said that this was an 8mm nut driver. It's a 7mm. Use that same wrench for the Ackerman, and putting the Ackerman plate to the bell cranks. Oh, there we go. It was kind of like snugging up, but I could tell it wasn't all the way. So that thing, you just tighten it all the way down. Nice and free. Little play up and down. And now here we have the threaded side goes into the ball for the carb. I don't really want to chuck this part into the drill just because you might get carried away and accidentally run it all the way through, which wouldn't be that cool. So I'm going to go ahead, put one of those things on the very end so I have a little handle. I'm going to work on just threading that in. Try to make sure you get it nice and straight. It's a little hard to grab, so I'm just going to put a rag on it. Sometimes you'll feel like what just happened, it's actually spinning, so I got to tighten it a little bit more, and if you really want to, you can just leave your wrench on it. Put it in like so. Make sure you don't go too far. And ruin the ball. I think I'm good. Alright, so now we'll pop that off. And we put one of those collars on, then we put this larger spring on, then thought I was forgetting something. Then you put those little plastic half circle thingies on there, put it through, and put another one of those collars on the other side. Doesn't really matter where it goes right now because we don't have anything set. I like to just make sure my set screws are all sticking straight up. Lined up. Correctly with the ball. So that we can adjust it once we get the engine in and all that. So there you can see I have the throttle side done. Looking good, looking good. Now for the tricky part and the most important part. We don't have to work standing up here. I prefer working standing up anyways. So let's see. Adjust you guys a little bit. There we go. Well, I can sit down actually. You can see the car here. So have the top plate on. The reason they switch this top plate around, the design, is so that you can set the linkage much easier with it being open on the left side, the side where you're going to have your your brake linkage set up basically. I already tell this is way too long. Just because it's going to annoy me, I'm going to tighten that up some. Alright, boom. So I'm just putting the horn on the servo. It's not really like in the correct spot or anything like that because, I don't have it set up. My radio's not set up to this car. I don't have a model or nothing made yet. But what I want to show you guys is how to do this linkage. Yeah, thought I forgot something. I definitely need to use the manual when I do the linkage because I don't build linkages enough. Sometimes if I have a linkage it's just working really good, I'll like use the same linkage car to car when I build a fresh car just because it's difficult building a super good linkage and it's time consuming. So make sure you take your time here. I had to redo the throttle side. So when you put it on, you do the first collar, spring, those like that plastic half round thing, and it goes towards the center, towards that ball so that it actually centers in that. And then you do another plastic one, then the last collar. So that's good to go. Now you'll have two of those little plastic things left. And you slide them onto these rods facing in. And this is where I'm going to do something different that is not going to be very common. So we have these little springs right here. And these are the same springs that go in between these brake pads. I'm using the Tekno stiff springs. I actually put that on next. I'm not sure. Oh, awesome. It says to use fuel tubing. The 2.0 had these O-rings that were super hard. And when you use those hard O-rings, basically the harder that material is, the less linear your brakes are. So like the harder the material, the kind of the more powerful brakes you're gonna have. So when it's really hard, you basically just have like an on-off switch for your brakes, which isn't really awesome. I'm gonna use JTP black fuel line. I'm going to use it for the whole car, so just crack open a fresh bag, and I'm going to slice a really clean, straight piece off the end, and do my cuts. It calls for a 10 mil, which, let's see. So with this, kind of the shorter the fuel line, the stronger and the stiffer your brake is going to be. Oh man, my ruler's a hot mess. Get this handy dandy ruler out. Measure these things. Let's see. 10's pretty long. I'm going like 5 on mine. You can do 10. That's how you're building it. You just want to make sure these are the same size. Like I said, you're going to have a little bit of a stronger brake the longer that you have it. So I'm doing 5 because I also have that spring. So what I found when I run the spring and the O-ring is I get a really smooth brake feel where it's pretty soft on the initial, but I can have my brake like kick in pretty early, so I don't use like, I don't have dead trigger where it's like half the braking trigger and nothing happens, and then all of a sudden I have all my brake with the second half of the trigger. So I want to be able to have brake all the way through my trigger, and this is the best way that I have found to achieve that. So then I go ahead, put these collars on, try to have all my set screws facing up. Have it centered. So that's where I'm going to have my servo at center, and that's pretty good. Move it a little bit and feel the brake kicking in some, so I know I'm pretty close. I'm going to tighten these up just a smidge. I'm a little too tight. Because I want to clean up all these extra pieces hanging off so that my linkage looks really clean, but got it all on there. Let me show you what it's looking like. So there you can see the linkage with the spring, and then the fuel tubing, and then the collar. You can see I have the knobs that you grab to twist to adjust when your brakes kick on. Offset, front and rear, top and bottom, just so you know you have room to get to it. That upper one is really easy just to get to, you know, having it on the inside. This bottom one, you can have it on the outside, and it's good for body clearance and stuff. I feel like if you have both on the top, you know, one's kind of hitting the body, doesn't look as clean, and you know, building a fresh car, all for that clean look. So yeah, pretty stoked on how this linkage is going to be going together. So we got that going. I think the next step here, I'm going to do engine mounts. I'm actually using the Van Dalen FTR quick change engine mounts. So just gonna put those in next. I'm gonna use red Loctite on these because don't want my engine mounts moving. Anytime you crack these loose, always a good idea to put fresh Loctite on. And one important thing to note, say before your main, you're checking your screws, stuff like that, you don't really want to check a screw hard that you have Loctite on. You can put a wrench on it and just very lightly move it to see if it's like super loose, but you're not gonna want to torque on it, because if it's Loctited and you torque on it, even going tight and it like moves at all, you've just broke the Loctite loose, and so you have a pretty good chance that that screw is now gonna fall out. So if you're not too sure how your motor mount screws are and you want to tighten them before the main, the best thing to do is loosen, crack one loose, take it all the way out, re-Loctite it, put it back in, super tighten it down, do one other one, and just go one at a time so you don't move your motor and you are reapplying fresh Loctite, because you don't want to check it and have it move on you, because you'll break that Loctite loose. So I see people doing that, especially like center drive shafts, like on the pinion gear before a main. People want to check those, and if you torque on that and it moves, you crack your Loctite, that thing's coming out in your main and you just created yourself a DNF. So if you build your car correctly, use red Loctite, especially on those center drive shafts, you should really never even have to check those. If you do want to check those, make sure that you have your diff out of your car and everything, and you just crack it loose, re-Loctite it, put it back in, make sure it's all free, not bound up. But those are items that you can't really just torque on to see if they're tight, because you'll break the Loctite loose. So, all right, we got that going. I guess next step would be the steering linkage, which is pretty cool. We got this new screw here, this screw design. Let's kind of see how this works. If I would have followed the manual, it probably would have already told me to put the screw in, which would probably made more sense, but I didn't follow the manual, so now I'm having to do it the harder way, maybe. Yeah, having a little hard time trying to go through. Oh, there we go. I'm just a little stuck. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think it says to just run, I don't know, one washer or something. I like to make sure that I'm standing, so my head is probably out of the shot. I like to make sure that this thing's kind of tight. That my steering link is pretty like flat, so that's what I'm gonna check. This thing is not wanting to go on. This thing's a little tight. I feel like it's kind of pinched down or something. Just gonna go ahead, put an X-Acto in there. Try to open that thing up a little. Maybe I'll just put it in without the pinch bolt in there at all. This thing's tight for sure. I'll have to get a flathead. Alright. Grab me a little flathead. Just gonna spread this thing out a little bit. Might have a little burr or something on the threads. Man. There we go. Tightened it down. Pushed it all the way down. Alright, so now, like I said, I want this good and flat. It's going to need quite a bit more than one shim, so I'm going to throw 4 shims on there. Let's see how that's looking. That's looking okay. I'm gonna go one more. It's not gonna be totally flat, but we're gonna be looking better than what we were. It's calling for a flange nut up there. I already used the flange nut on the top of the servo, so I'm gonna have to grab another flange nut real quick. Should have one right here. Boom. Go ahead, put that on. Grab my 5.5. Tighten that down. Boom. There we go. You can see not perfectly level there, but pretty close. Not gonna bind. You just want it to be able to move. So yeah, we're good. We're good with that. And yeah, got both linkages on. Looking good.